Taylor Swift isn't the only one who has eras, you know. Welcome to the Stephen King Eras Tour. Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. I'm Dave Musson, at Dave Musson on Instagram, and this is the place where I talk to you about all things Stephen King. Have a look in the links in the description to find my range of Stephen King themed band shirts, like my Misery Run DMC crossover. You can also find my own collection of short stories, Once More Around the Sun, link to my newsletter and a bunch of other stuff. But most of all, thank you for checking this video out. I hope you enjoy it. So this video is a bit of a random special. The idea popped into my head and I haven't been able to let it go. But I kind of like it. It sort of works as an alternative starter kit for those of you who are perhaps thinking about wanting to get into Stephen King, don't know exactly where to get started or how to go about reading him. Over the course of Stephen King's career, there are very distinct eras of his writing, whether that's a subject matter or a style of writing or a genre he leans more towards. So what I've tried to do is cluster some of those together in a spoiler-free fashion, so you get a better idea of which points of Stephen King's chronology are where he's focusing on different subjects, etc. that I've already talked about, and you might find one that you feel comfortable jumping in on there. So, like I say, see this as an extension of the Stephen King starter kit. It's another way of answering that question, where do I start reading with Stephen King? I've just tried to tap into the Taylor Swift thing because I've been seeing it all summer. I don't really understand it, find it a bit annoying, but it works because Stephen King has eras and her tour was eras as well. So yeah, I'm not going to comment anymore on Taylor Swift. Not a fan of her music, but nothing against her or her legion of Swifties. But I'm more about my version of a Swiftie, constant readers. So let's get into this. Like I say, it's going to be completely spoiler free, and I've just tried to group them into eras that I see as someone who has read all of his work twice, currently on my third run through. You can see how I'm getting on with my chronological reread elsewhere on this channel. But I just wanted to give you an overview of the different eras of his work. So let's jump into it. I keep saying eras, I keep saying let's go. Let's actually go. Let's go. Here is the Stephen King Eras Tour. Okay, so to start off, we're going with the early years, like the on the way up era. So this is King coming out the gates, coming out the traps, and showing the world what he's all about. So my selection for this era, we've got Carrie. It's my nice 50th anniversary edition. It's basically the first few books. So Carrie, Salem's Lot, which I forgot to get off the shelf. And we've got, they're all on my lap and they're all falling off. The Shining, Night Shift, The Stand, my personal favourite, The Dead Zone, and Firestarter. So this selection of books, for many constant readers, remember that's the Stephen King equivalent of Swifties, this pile of books is kind of the gold standard, and a lot of King readers who have been there from the start, basically these are the ones for them. Well, there are many King readers who tailed off after these ones. This is kind of the selection of books that a lot of people hold everything else accountable to. Is accountable to the right word? No. This is the standard they hold everything else up against. So this is kind of like Metallica's first 4 albums. Like, these are the books that made Stephen King who he is, and these are the books that set up his career. And they cover so much. We've got telekinesis, we've got vampires, we've got evil hotels, we've got a range of amazing short stories, we've got The End of the World, we've got political thriller with kind of psych abilities, and we've got being able to start fire with your mind and shady government agencies. Like, this is a great selection box of Stephen King and a great starting point. Like, just get this bundle of books and devour them. Okay, so that first era led to the next era, which I'm calling the cocaine years, or the alternative version is I have no memory of writing this, specifically because Cujo, which kicks off this era, is a book that King doesn't have any memory of writing because he was drinking heavily at the time. But books like Cujo, Christine, Thinner, short story collection Skeleton Crew, It, The Tommyknockers, these big 80s books that kind of cemented his reputation, but also like almost like the cliche Stephen King. So we've got the evil dog, the evil car, the evil Romany people, the evil monkey, the evil clown, the evil aliens. Like, this is where the sort of Stephen King jokes come from, that Family Guy scene. It's this run. And these books are great. They're also like mad. They are pulpy and crazy. And I know it's very rude me putting them down, but I can't hold them anymore. And they're just driven by this wild, frenetic energy that means you get scenes that make you go, what? That was weird. But you also get some great scares and some great moments. And I'm also going to throw in Under the Dome, which is from 2009, but this feels like it could fit in this era. So if you're looking for the sort of crazy stuff, if you want to just go in on the sort of all the things you may have already seen the movies for, and you just want to see how the books compare, it's the I don't remember writing this era that you want to jump into. So the next era is the getting sober era. And that does what it says on the tin. King really made an effort to get sober coming out of the 80s and into the 90s. And there are a few books that sort of help track that process. I've included Misery here, and as I always do with this edition, I'm going to show you Hunky King. I've included Misery here as it kind of straddles that cocaine years with the getting sober years. This feels like an important book for that transition piece. And it talks a lot about addiction. This is addiction of a fan, but the way it writes about addiction is really powerful. But the main ones are like The Dark Half, 4 Past Midlife, and Needful Things. Like, this is not a fully sober King writing, but you can tell through these books that he is working to get there, particularly The Dark Half. 4 Past Midnight feels a bit messy because of it, but it's interesting viewed in the context of him getting sober. It's an interesting read. And Needful Things is like tapping into that 80s energy, but with a clearer head to write it. And the result is just like chaos and carnage. So yeah, there's a getting sober era for you. So next up, we're into the 90s, one of my favourite periods of his writing, and a particular era I've honed in on is one we could term either domestic abuse or strong women characters. So we have this run of books where we get Dolores Claiborne, Gerald's Game, Insomnia, and Rose Madder that all deal with the topics of domestic abuse and are almost all told from the woman's perspective. Insomnia isn't, but has some great women characters in there. But Dolores Claiborne, Gerald's Game, and Rose Madder in particular, if you're looking for King writing brilliant women characters, check those ones out. But these are all underrated pieces of King's work, but absolutely fascinating and terrific stories. And some really good writing as well. Dolores Claiborne is pretty literary. Gerald's Game, we really get inside the head of a character. Insomnia just has these very weird and vivid images. And Rose Madder just goes full-on bonkers and is completely brutal. Yeah, and this might be a good era to dip into if you've only ever done like the classics of King and the earlier eras. Like, say, this is an underrated, underappreciated part of his career. And this is a great way to gauge where his head was at in the early 90s. Okay, I'm calling the next era the midlife crisis era. So we've got Desperation, we've got Bag of Bones, so we've got Hearts in Atlantis. So Desperation sits in here because, well, it was kind of inspired when King was off riding his motorbike around the country, which feels like a very midlife crisis type thing to do. And it's lots of questions about God and faith and all of those kind of things. It's kind of pondering what the point of it all is. Bag of Bones is just ridiculously horny middle-aged man getting into a relationship with a much younger woman. Like, this is midlife crisis in literature form. Very good book as well. And Hearts in Atlantis is King reflecting on his own college years and reflecting on how the boomers just failed, basically. So a really good trio of books to see King through his midlife crisis. Now, at this point in his life, in 1999, he was out walking and got struck by a minivan, very seriously injured, and had to go through a lot of recovery. And that informs the second half of his career, really. And it particularly informs the next era, which I'm going to get to. So that era is the post-accident era. So we have Dreamcatcher, we have From a Buick 8, we have the conclusion of The Dark Tower, we have The Colorado Kid, we have Lacey's Story, and we have Do McKee. Now, all of these sit together in an era, but they're all worth mentioning on their own for different reasons. So Dreamcatcher was the book that King wrote while he was recovering. He literally wrote it by hand while off his face on pain meds. This is a hugely important book for his journey. It's a bit messy, but it's great and really gives you an insight into what he was thinking post-accident right away. From a Buick 8 is in here because it's a book that is searching for answers and has to be satisfied with not finding all of the answers. And I think that's a fair reflection on King thinking about life. The Dark Tower finale is in here because that's what he realized he had to do. When he recovered from the accident, he realized he had to finish this saga and get to the tower. The Colorado Kid, similar to From a Buick 8, another book about questions that are not necessarily answered in a way that might be satisfying. And King kind of giving himself the freedom to try something new, going on hard case crime, for example. Just really interesting, exploring new avenues. Now he'd got the tower out of the way. Lacey's story is in here because, well, it's about a widow, and it's King pondering what might have been for his wife had he passed. And that also sparked out of him going back into hospital for post-accident recovery complications as well, which is what really prompted it. And then Do McKee is his most powerful piece of writing about recovery. The character in this suffers a horrendous accident and has to go through tremendous recovery. And it kind of encapsulates all of these years of King's own recovery into one powerful book. So next up, I've called this era the having fun era, which is where King has gone through his recovery, he's done all the other stuff, and now he's just enjoying still being around and still being able to write and still having the ideas. So the books I've put in here are 11/22/63, a book he'd been trying to write since the 70s and it had always daunted him. He finally had the space and the confidence to do it, and he nailed it. Wind Through the Keyhole, a Dark Tower novel, just going back to the tower and giving us an in-between story. Why not? Doctor Sleep, sequel to The Shining. Yeah, sure, give us that too. And Joyland, another hard case crime book. King having some fun going back with a 70s story, big nostalgia vibes, and a murder mystery as well. Like, quite disparate from each other in terms of style, themes and all of that, but they all just fit nicely in this. I'm just going to do what I want. I'm Stephen King. The last era I wanted to get into was the crime/Holly era. So it was all kicked off by the Mr. Mercedes trilogy, which was King writing a detective series. Mr. Mercedes, Finders Keepers, and End of Watch. One of the small characters in that was Holly Gibney, but she turned out to be a much bigger character. So we see her again in The Outsider, which is another crime piece. We see her in the story If It Bleeds, in the collection If It Bleeds, which is a sequel to The Outsider. Also, along this time, a couple of non-Holly crime books we get later, and we get Billy Summers, but then Holly comes back with a vengeance in her own novel. And as I sit here recording this, next year, 2025, we should be expecting Always Holly, another Holly Gibney book. So this is King leaning into his own love of crime fiction and having a go himself. And he's pretty good at it. It's not exactly the stuff I like from him the most, but it's eminently readable. And if you want to have a stab at more modern day King, if you haven't kept up with King's newer works, this cluster of books is as good as any to give you an idea of what he's been doing recently. And that concludes the Stephen King ERAS tour. As for what he does next, whatever the hell he wants. So there we go, the Stephen King ERAS tour is done. Let me know which of those eras is your favourite, and let me know if you have any of your own that I didn't include. Thanks so much for checking out this video. The usual, check out the links, buy the t-shirt, get my short story collection, sign up to the newsletter, subscribe to the channel, share it with a friend, all of those kind of things. And hey, let me know your favourite eras of this, and let me know a Taylor Swift song I should go and listen to. You know me, I like loud guitars, shouty vocals, hardcore, metal, rock, punk, those kind of things. Okay, I know Shake It Off. That's a bang. That's like the only Taylor Swift song I know. So what should I check out? If there are any Constant Reader Swiftie crossovers, give me a Taylor Swift track to check out that you think I might like. and I will report back and let you know if it's any good and might help me understand another cultural icon better. But for now, I will stick in the realm of my own preferred cultural icon, Mr. Stephen King. Thank you for all the eras. I'm looking forward to your next one, and I'll see you very soon.